Welcome to episode 5 of the Crackpot podcast with James LaFond and Lynn Lockhart. This episode was taped July 11th and will be presented in 5 parts. You are listening to part 3. How's the Murder Bowl shaping up?
Oh, the boys are doing fine. I think they clipped 3 of them on the 4th of July. We've got to be over 180 now.
Wow.
I haven't checked it in a couple of days. It's still looking like we're on pace for 350. It's hard for me to imagine this not being the biggest year Baltimore's ever had for murders.
Wow.
2015 was huge, but it was still one killing short of 71. It was more per capita.
Yeah.
This one was. And with our population dropping, even with them bringing in Somalis and other people that they were bringing in, we get a lot of Latinos here. Salvador, Honduras, and Mexico are where they're bringing in most of them from.
And those guys are pretty valuable on the team, right? They're doing more than their share of murders, would you say?
Oh, no.
No?
The MS-13 is in Baltimore. There's a couple of Latino murders a year. I assume these are by other Latinos. It's not much. These are mostly, at this point, just working people. Now, if you go down to the D.C. area, where MS-13 is really big, they're finding bodies on the side of the road. People just disappear. It's really nasty down there. That's coming to Baltimore, but it takes a while because first you have to build the prey population. These people come in and they prey on other Latinos predominantly.
Mm-hmm.
And then after they establish that, then they'll start going after the black criminals and start edging them out of their trade like they're doing in the West and the Southwest. I'm kind of looking forward to that, actually. The East Baltimore has really been transformed. When I was interviewing people for The Logic of Steel 20 years ago, I was talking to 2 Puerto Rican guys, and they were shocked at how few Hispanics there were in Baltimore.
Yeah.
This was not a Hispanic city. There was a couple of Puerto Ricans. That's it. Around 2000, the floodgates really opened, and large sections of East Baltimore are all Latino.
Mm-hmm.
And there has been some Latino on white crime. I really can't talk about the one incident that I know about because the guy successfully defended himself, and I don't want to get him in trouble. But there was that. There was a 5-on-1, 2 blocks from where my friend got stabbed in the neck by one of 3 hood rats, another one of which had a handgun.
Wow.
The Latino guys were all unarmed.
Oh.
And again, that's when they go after facilities, there's a group of these guys that have been using machetes and guns to rob liquor stores. But out on the street, there's enough of them. You have a lot of population density. You have good group cohesion. There's really no reason to take a weapons charge just robbing somebody when you beat them up. They didn't realize that this guy, was who he was. So maybe they will change and start using more weapons on street crimes. There's hasn't been much news of Latinos and blacks mixing it up. It's predominantly the blacks are killing the blacks and sidelining with some recreational murders of white women and older white guys. And with the Latinos, it seems to be the same thing. For both of them, the whites are the sideline, and they're pretty much going after their own. So it'll be nice when they start going after each other. I did coach a guy that worked at the central booking facility for all the juvenile offenders. There were 500 inmates. Uh, Two of them were not black. One of them was white, and one of them was a skinny little kid from El Salvador, I think. The black kids would not touch that kid. Them and the staff were all over the white guy, tormenting him day in and day out. But nobody messed with this skinny little 14-year-old kid. So that right there tells you that they've got an organized presence in Baltimore.
Yeah, that is interesting, especially outnumbered like that. And
the staff wouldn't mess with him because the staff
they knew
beat
better.
up and torture and rape these people. 2013, RT put up a report that the DOJ did. The Department of Justice did their own series of interviews with juveniles that were incarcerated, and they came up with huge numbers for rape by staff. Talking to these kids who were apparently were given assurances that they weren't going to get burned by the staff, and
Right.
it was for information purposes. They didn't go after any of the staff. They just put this report out there. So them not doing that to this staff, which is all black, them not doing anything to this kid tells you that that they're afraid of an organized group.
Well, something that has been observed in California is that Central Americans, predominantly Mexicans, because this is already one thing that's happened in the last 30 years is basically that Mexico's practically emptied of anybody who wanted to leave has already left, and they're mostly here in California and in the Southwest. So we mostly have Mexicans, but I think you will mostly have other Central Americans. But just to say, Central Americans are kind of a wedge in the gentrification process here. And because if you remember back in like the in the 90s, South Central LA, right, was black, and it's not anymore. It's primarily Mexican and Spanish-speaking people. And up here in Northern California, it's happened as well. I don't know if you've ever heard of the town called Palo Alto, but
Yes.
That's where Stanford University is, and it's really fancy. But there's East Palo Alto, which is just on the other side of Highway 101, and right on the bay, and that used to be black, and now it's Mexican. And so it's just, they get squeezed out and they get kind of transplanted out into the suburbs, and it's part of the process. So maybe you'll see some of that there.
We have.
Yeah.
They use the Dindus to hunt the whites, to get the working class whites out, and the first gentrification initiatives in Baltimore, the working class whites that stayed, that were in areas like South Baltimore, which is a peninsula and it's defensible, that acted as a shield for the hipsters to come in and do their gentrification thing. Then the housing taxes went up so high that these poor white people had to move, and the hipsters lost their protection, and now they're starting to get hit. There's starting to be some predation. So the big expansion has been in Canton, which is north of Fells Point. There's a lot of black and white crime in Fells Point, a little bit in Canton, but it's not as bad in Canton because Eastern Avenue has become this Spanish corridor. And when you're at the latitude of Canton, these black kids are going to have to come from Patterson Park, north of Hopkins, and cross Eastern Avenue and now go through a Latino neighborhood. And that's a whole different thing from going through a white neighborhood.
Right.
So it's already happening here. And then they're still being useful. They're still doing the government's work because they're being sent out to Baltimore County to drive working class whites out of those areas and to get them farther away so you could hollow out the ghetto a little bit more and, bring in some more rich white people. So I think it's going pretty well.
Yeah. It makes me think of the comment you made about Katie McHugh going back. You said that how it just shows how clueless most of the alt-right is about um, urban. Is that what the word you used? Urban life. And I
Yes.
think it's a big. There's a huge difference between blue collar white middle class and white collar white middle class, and I think partly it's like the college thing where everybody you have to go to college and it kind of siphons people off of the working class and into this what's now become a really useless really useless educated class. Even that's the wrong word. They're not
Oh,
really educated, but
they're useful. They consume,
hmm
which is the purpose for a society, and they vote, which is going
yeah.
to help regulate the consumption, and it's going to permit violence against really the only class of people that are capable of resisting the criminal element, which is your working class.
Yeah.
You know,
But
it's war on the working class, and
yeah.
the people don't need it. It's been facilitated. Um, if you think of all the horror movies that young guys that are bound for college have grown up watching, the bad guys are always rural white guys of the working class. Always. You
Yeah.
know, that's it. No matter what you have to do to them. And that just targets, your prejudice for having a group to look at and sneer at.
All right.
That targets it there. And then the working class white people that are still in the city, on top of being evil because of their race, they're also despised because they stayed.
Mhm.
They stayed behind. There's nothing that white people despise more than somebody that doesn't tuck tail and run from the enemy, because that's supposed to be what you do. That's the civilized way to make your way in the world. So I think there's a lot of obtuseness there. There's this orientation that the middle class and the upper class have against the working class, that it just predisposes them to not pick up things.
These are white working class people who are even more foreign to this the white educated. I don't know what the right word is. The middle class.
Well,
Because a lot of
we've
these
got to
work.
hate somebody,
Yeah.
and it's not cool to hate somebody that's of a different race,
Mhm.
because that's bad. So,
Right.
and it's the same thing with the blacks. Blacks hate black people. You have all the middle class and upper class whites hate working class whites. The working class whites hate the middle class and the upper class. So the whites hate the whites, and the blacks hate the blacks. It's a big happy family.
Yeah, it's true. Maybe it's just part of life.
The one thing that I have noticed with the men that I've worked for, the guys that really made it, and there's not too many people making $250,000 a year in the supermarket business.
No.
Okay. But those guys that do, they start acting like the owners of a sports team,
Mm.
where they start befriending the working class people. They become the advocate, the friend. They'll come around and shake your hand if you're the stock clerk, and then cuss out the store manager, in front of a customer.
Mm.
And this is really common. So there's that. Um, there's just that dynamic that people have when they're on top. They want to play the groups that are underneath them against each other.
Right.
I've just seen it so much. It's so predictable. So predictable.
Thanks for listening to part 3 of episode 5 of the Crackpot podcast with James LaFond and Lynn Lockhart.